Good morning. This is Tracy Hales Vass with Right On Four Corners on KSJE 90.9 FM in Farmington, New Mexico. Today, I'm talking again with Jeanne Burrows-Johnson about her latest book, Murders of Conveyance, from Tucson, Arizona. Good morning, Jeanne.
Well, good morning. How are you, Tracy?
I'm great. Well, I really enjoyed Murders of Conveyance, though it took me a while to figure out why it was titled that way.
Uh-huh.
And I was really glad to see the Wong sisters again and our other folks. Why don't you give our listeners a little synopsis of Murders of Conveyance?
I will indeed. Why don't we start with what the meaning of the title is, because some people may say, gee, I'm with Tracy. I don't get what that would mean. Conveyance is a term that's quite often used in transfer of property. It's quite often a legal term. And in this particular case, we have a Chinese, and I'll say Hawaiian family, because there's been some intermarriage there.
Mm-hmm.
And they live in old Chinatown in a building they've owned for a very long time, since the patriarch arrived from China. And it's the Shen building they live in, and it's gone through a few different lives. At one point it was a hotel. And then there's a little bit of questioning as to maybe it really did fit into the red light district at one point. And there's an issue with that building, because the only way that someone inherits that property is by agreeing to live on the property. So that's one aspect in which conveyance of property,
right,
is an issue. And then we also have something that emerges in the story, that there is a missing, the Asian term is bodhisattva,
mm-hmm.
which is, to some people's interpretation, a lesser god. That is not the way a Buddhist or a Hindu would put it.
Right.
But it is a sacred figure. And there's a question of where it might be.
Mm-hmm.
And what it is in this particular case, a lot of your listeners will relate to. It's a small statue of a Kuan Yin figure.
Mm-hmm.
And Kuan Yin is a representation of motherhood in a lot of ways,
Mm-hmm.
a woman who cares about other women around the world. She hears the cries of the world. In this particular case, we're looking for one that is in white jade. That kind of materializes. Now, the basis of the story is fairly simple. My protagonist, Natalie, and her now honey, semi-retired, private detective now, Keone Hewitt, and the two of them have gone into Honolulu to spend a week at the first annual Aloha scavenger hunt all across Oahu. So we have a galloping good time with lots of adventures. I'll read a little bit about that later on. And while they're there, they're vacationing, they're having a great time, and Natalie continues to have visions and dreams. She can't always tell the difference. And she's been watching black and white old film noir with Keone, murder mysteries, classic stories, and she's had one that has come back a couple of times. And, she thinks about it, and she can't quite name what it might be. And then when they return one evening from their adventures, in their hallway they're stopped by the police. And they team up again with Lieutenant John Diaz, Keone's old partner.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been a little murder in their hallway. When Natalie looks that over, she says, this kind of parallels that dream I was having. And before long, what we end up with are two murders of men in white suits in hotel hallways. But the murders are separated by 60 years. Now we get to have two investigations going on simultaneously. And it's all taking place in downtown Honolulu, in old Chinatown for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And in the meantime, we continue to have that scavenger hunt.
Right.
And that is the premise of Murders of Conveyance.
And as usual for you, there are wonderful descriptions of meals and foods and great descriptions of the setting of Hawaii. And I really
I'm so glad you enjoyed that.
Oh, yes. I love the scavenger hunt that takes them all around the island of Oahu. And as again, in your past books, you have a variety of different types of people, shall we say. And
Mm-hmm.
and of course, Miss Una,
Oh, yes.
our
You know,
cat.
the name came from my discovery that the word for tortoiseshell in Hawaiian is una.
Oh,
So if some people are from the Southwest and they know Spanish, and they're saying, oh, that's an indefinite article. No, it's not in this
no, it's
case.
not.
It's not at all. So Miss Una is a tortoiseshell kitty, and
Yes.
she has indeed been Natalie's companion for a while. She's what I call silent but fleet-footed. And those busy little paws of hers are known to discover interesting things in strange places.
Yes, she certainly does that in this one. And so, Murders of Conveyance is a continuation, but a separate mystery. I mean, it's a continuation of the same characters. We met the Wong sisters in the previous books, and I was glad to see that they're still close with Natalie.
Hmm.
And then she's got the ladies next door.
Now, they have arrived because Natalie inherited her Auntie Carrie's cottage, beachside cottage in Lanikai,
Mm-hmm.
and so she and Keone have remodeled it. And the ladies are her neighbors. And it's a group of elderly women who've moved in with one another. It keeps the economy growing for all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another case that they were involved with,
Yes.
and that comes from the second book, Murder on Mokulua Drive. So now
Mhm.
we have Natalie and Keone living on the windward side near the beach.
Yeah, they can walk out their front door for a swim very often.
Yes.
They have a wonderful life, and the murder mysteries seem to, well, they work on them together, so I think they add to that.
I hope so.
Yes. Do you want to read for us a little bit from Murders
I
of
would be
Conveyance?
delighted to do that. I'm going to read two things. I do want to make it clear that these are adaptations. The first thing I'm going to do is read an adaptation of the prologue to Murders of Conveyance. I look around the metal cage surrounding me. Below my sandaled feet are scuffed tiles framing a Chinese logogram. With heavy vibration, the vintage elevator stops. The gate opens by an unseen hand, and I walk out to the black and white scene of a film noir. I face three sash windows, the center one being wider than those flanking it. Above them, three clerestory windows form an arch reaching toward the roof line. I look down at a patterned carpet runner on a dark wood floor. Which way shall I turn? I move to the right and soon reach the end of the short hallway. I walk forward slowly until I stand above a man stretched out diagonally across the floor. He is definitely dead. He wears a white suit. Although he is lying on his stomach, I see the collar of an aloha shirt. Two-toned shoes stick out from his pant leg cuffs. Above his head, a fedora leans against the base of the wall. 2 inches to the left of the man's shoes, the door to room 312 stands ajar. The opening widens. I look within. A woman rises from inspecting the space below a single bed. Turning away from me, she examines each drawer of the room's dresser, desk, and nightstand. I suddenly find myself positioned behind her as she opens the door to a closet with dressing room. She gazes steadily at a large mirror resting against the back wall. The glass is mottled with age, and I cannot see her features. She walks to the mirror and pulls it toward her. She looks behind, and then with a disgusted sigh, pushes it back in place. Stepping backward, the woman again looks into the mirror and straightens her tailored skirt and jacket. Other than her dark, upswept hair, the only characteristic I note about her is her height, because she's considerably taller than I am. I watch silently as the stately woman strides quickly past me and into the bedroom. I turn to face her retreating figure. Shortly, I hear the elevator clang open and shut. And now I'd like to provide your listeners with a little tiny bit of a feeling for scavenger hunt itself.
Great.
And so we have a quote to begin our chapter 3 from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This is a rather famous quote. The game is afoot. And in this sample, Natalie is joined by Keone in the downtown hotel where they're staying. And they have mainland friends who came in, Margie and Dan Hoara, who've also been in a couple of the other books.
Right.
And so now we have a little bit of a look at the Aloha Scavenger Hunt. We begin with the words of MC Jason Jeanne, who's kicking off this great event. Beyond our nightly cocktail parties and banquet on Friday, there are a couple of special events scheduled this week. The first is Wednesday night's Hawaiian Luau, and Thursday is the start of Chinese New Year. As you can imagine, it's fairly popular here in the island, so we're treating you to a traditional Chinese New Year's feast. And then he goes on and says, well, that's all for this morning. Please see one of the board members if you have any questions. And now please open the first clue of the Aloha Scavenger Hunt. Keone slit the envelope with the tip of his pen and said, I think we can take a few minutes to analyze the task, since I've already moved the car to a side street. As most of the contestants were exiting the room, we huddled around the clue and all of the promotional brochures and flyers we had collected. The first annual Aloha Scavenger Hunt. Day 1, Clue 1. Shortest distance to your destination, 6.5 miles. Rising nearly straight up from today's point of origin, a panorama of significance to the unifying royal delights both guests and residents, who pay no heed to the keening thrall of 400 warriors who plunged in free fall to their deaths more than 2 centuries ago. One nice thing about your being teamed with a retired cop is that I know this island pretty well, declared Keone. Couple that with the research I've done for numerous articles I've written, and you've got a unified approach to such riddles, I added. So what is the solution to this clue? Asked Margie. In near unison, Keone and I announced, the Polly Lookout. As we rushed out to the car, Dan asked how we had figured out our solution. Well, before we read it, I was prepared to bring out my compass and draw a circle on the map of Oahu on the back of the hunt brochure. But with the hotel so close to the water, I figured the location had to be Mauka, toward the mountains. For me, it was the phrase unifying royal, I noted. Years ago, I wrote an article on King Kamehameha I. He unified the Hawaiian Islands. The mention of warriors is significant because the deciding battle in unifying the Hawaiian nation was fought in the area of the Lookout. And then they go ahead and travel to their destination.
Yes.
And they're hoping they're going to be the first to arrive, but they're not.
Not quite.
Welcoming us with a shake of their head, they were greeted by someone that they know. And the funny thing is, the kids that managed to win that little exercise actually had taken a tour of the islands when they first arrived as college students on the island. And guess what they won as a prize? Another trip around the island. And so that is the first adventure in the scavenger hunt.
It's very clever, the different clues and what they mean. And you've worked really hard on so many levels with making the mysteries, but also the whole mystery of the scavenger hunt and how they unravel that.
Well, thank you again on that. It was rather interesting. I had to come up with kind of rhythmic and poetic phrasing for each of the clues.
Right.
And some of them took quite a while to come up with, and then I would take them to my writer's salon, and cowboy poet and prosaist Bill Black would look them over technically, and he would find something I'd gotten wrong in terms of how you drive your car to get there, or how you dig through something, or how signage and parking lots are set up. He's very good on catching me on technical issues. That's
great to have someone like that. I was wondering, I know that you weren't in Hawaii when you wrote this, right?
No, that's right. I've been gone for some time.
So you had to really reach back into memory and do research to plan the scavenger hunt, plus all the distances and the goings-on and the placement of this and that.
Yes, it does require a bit. Now, of course, I still have friends on the island, and I should, I guess, announce that I'm hoping first week in May this next year, I'll be at the Hawaii Book and Music Festival in downtown Honolulu.
Oh, that's great.
And that'll give me a chance to see the many people who have been helping me through these various things. Of course, when you're dealing with island life, they don't grow any more land, as they say.
That's true.
And so there are some things that don't necessarily change. But, of course, things like restaurants, which I love to refer to, those do change.
Right, I'm sure.
And so something that you thought was absolutely wonderful, like a darling little pizza place, is no longer there. And you have to find something else to take its place.
Yes.
So, yes, there is a lot of research. And, of course, the languages, I have in this one a lot of Hawaiian, as usual, and then Chinese. And then you have to be very careful about, are you dealing with Mandarin Chinese or Cantonese Chinese? And
exactly.
So I have to rely on language specialists to help me out. And again, I always say, mea culpa. If you catch me in an error, I apologize, but do bring it to my attention. I'll try to avoid it in the future.
And the glossary in the back is always helpful.
Oh, I'm so glad you like that.
Oh, yeah. And it wasn't just Hawaiian words, but there's Chinese in there also.
And even French.
Yes, exactly. You start off with a diacritical key for the Hawaiian language.
Oh, that's true. I do include that. It's a very brief summary.
Yes.
I don't mean to be shortchanging the work of wonderful linguists that has taken place for, a very, very long time, many, many decades. And there's certainly a revival of the language. But for those who are not going to undertake, serious study and they want a quick guide, that's something I provide.
You must write all the time. Book after Murders of Conveyance is finished and with the editor.
Yes, it is. It's called Yen for Murder.
Oh, I like that. This one leaves that open to wonder who we're going to see again.
Oh, you're going to see some of the same people and some new people.
Great.
Because in this one we do have the theft of a major statue of the Shakyamuni Buddha from a Japanese temple.
Oh, wow.
And that occurs at the same time as the murder of a female minister. Of course, the first questions are, was the statue stolen as an afterthought? Was the woman murdered on purpose? And so it's a new twist, shall we say.
Oh, I like that.
On criminality.
And you're going with the Japanese culture in this one, the next.
This time there's more of that.
Great.
Because, of course, it's taking place in a Jodoshin temple. And so we'll see some of the same characters from before. Young Elena Horita, who was introduced as I guess we would say, a patrolman in the old-fashioned term, but a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
And she's now become a detective
great.
in the fourth book. So I like to have everyone growing and changing a little bit. And because there are some major artifacts, I've brought in international auctions.
Oh, good.
And that took a lot of research. So we have European artifacts and we have Asian artifacts. And again, we get to wonder who done it. And we have our usual team. Miss Una plays her role again.
Oh, good.
And, of course, they work with Lieutenant John Diaz of HPD again.
That's great. Oh, good. I can hardly wait to see that one. Our listeners can find all kinds of information about you and your writing at your website.
Yes, they can.
And that's jeanneburrows-johnson.com.
That is true, and it is the French spelling of Jeanne, Jeanne.
Right.
And once you put that into your search engine, you will find not only the author website, but a marketing website, imaginingswordpower.com, and I also have a blog.
Right.
And that's to help not only authors, but also artists and other creative people. And there are some audio samples that are available across those, can be accessed, shall we say, through those online areas.
And I love that you have recipes.
Oh, yes. Times there have been reviewers who have said, I could pass on some of that food. But I'll tell you, I've actually read a book where I swear there was a recipe in every single chapter I read.
Yeah.
And so there was more attention to food preparation almost than the murder. And so I thought, I'll discuss food to a large extent and recipes in description in the books and restaurants. But if you'd actually like some recipes or you'd like to offer me one, please drop in at my author website. And yes, you will indeed find you will find some mango chutney and some desserts and teriyaki and scallops, and it's a growing list. I'll have to think how I'm going to reconfigure the website after.
I think that the food is so much a part of Natalie and Keone. I think that how they eat and what they eat are just really show their character also. And I love Keone's sun tea.
Ah, yes.
It comes up many times, and he's very artful in how he makes that.
Well, I ended up doing a little research on sun tea, and it ends up that you do have to be careful on your brewing and storing of tea. I was never aware of that.
Oh.
So your readers will actually find sun tea mentioned in recipes online.
I did see that and was very interested in that. I'll probably go back and use that recipe for sun tea.
Sounds like one of my friends and readers who has now adopted Sunday visits to Chili's diner and little takeout places because she likes the chili. Ever since she read the first book,
Right.
She's now addicted to that restaurant's chili.
Well, another thing about Natalie, she herself is not really that good a cook. She doesn't think, but she sure has a way of getting ready-made food and sprucing it up.
Well, not only that, but in book 4, she's busily taking some cooking classes.
She is.
She is. She's decided that when she was given those pots and pans for her wedding decades earlier, maybe they should be dusted off and utilized.
That's right. And the knife set that she wants to learn to use.
Absolutely.
I love that. Yeah, she's really a really likable character that's very real.
Yes, I've tried very much to base her on a number of characteristics that I find appealing from different women I've met through time. And being a journalist, she sort of has a new life because she's becoming an entertainment and food writer for an imaginary magazine. And so her own career is growing.
Yes.
And so that gives her excuses to go and research more things.
She does use that platform to help uncover some clues from the building that we spoke of at the beginning of this.
Well, I'll tell you something. The family will come back in a very minor way in book 4.
Oh, good.
But we will again also continue to have Pearl Wong and her adventures.
Good.
And so I like to carry the characters along because sometimes people say, gee, I wonder what happened to that little scenario, and
right.
And then an author will have dropped it and you never get to learn what happened.
Especially when Natalie makes such good friends with these characters. They should definitely be brought along.
Well, if I slip and you feel I've left somebody out, please remind me and I'll return to their adventures.
So what is your writing style or writing process? Do you write every day?
Oh, I write every day, but I will have to confess that with redesigning the 2 websites and adding some audio and visual aspects to the blog, and with more books coming out, it has meant that I spend more time on what we might call branding and marketing issues than I might like to spend on. But I never know where I'm going to get an idea. I love to write sometimes extemporaneously at night, and I'll be sitting there with a pad and paper, and by golly, I figured out how someone is going to die of a certain poison in book 5, which I have just started.
Great.
And I actually have a name for it. It's a spineless murder. There's always a little something in the titles that ends up being interesting as the case is solved. But,
right.
As I say, I was watching a murder mystery the other night, and there was a certain poison that was mentioned, and I said, by golly, that sounds like a good one. I need to go and do some research. So the next day I did some research. So there's always a level of research that has to be done. And I'd like to say that I write a nice, simple outline. I really try to do that, but it just, beyond the first couple of chapters, I really go with the flow. And I can say that consistently, I begin by writing a very, very lengthy prologue. It's like the mother lode of everything. And then it gets whittled down to this wee thing that appears at the beginning. And then as Natalie has continuing and expanding visions, the I get to put back material that I took out from that master and lengthy piece.
Right.
And so that gives me material that's going to be dropped in from time to time. But when people say that they have a problem with writer's block, that's never been a problem of mine.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a major issue on sequencing of things.
Right.
And
I
again,
understand that. Yeah.
I'm back to my wonderful co-authors from Under Sonoran Skies, with whom I continue to have a salon. And they'll catch me on something. Kailash, a psychologist who writes pithy little mysteries of her own, she'll catch me on sequencing of something.
Great.
And she'll say, well, now, wait a minute, you brought this up, but you forgot this. And, boy, that's the type of help that authors need. And so there's no telling how I'm going to be shaping something. But I know that with your career as an English teacher, in some ways I am a failure.
Oh, no.
Because I was taught to write these wonderful little outlines, and that's how I always took exams. But now that I'm writing the books, I mean, I could be walking through the store and say, oh, I like the way that cabinet opens, or,
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of chair that Natalie would want to sit in.
Right.
And so that sends me off in another direction that has nothing to do with what I had been shaping.
Right. Sometimes the story tells itself, and you just have to be there to catch it.
Absolutely, my dear, absolutely. Although I wouldn't mind visiting with you sometime about the little gaps there may be in my process.
Right. That would be great. You're headed back to Hawaii. Do you have anything else coming up soon?
Oh, let's see. Well, of course, there's the book fair next winter.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I may be attending the New Mexico Arizona Book Awards celebration in, I think it's the first weekend in November.
Mm-hmm.
And those folks have been very, very kind to me.
Yes.
I have a great artist, Yasmin Jeanne, with whom I work. But for the most part, the designs for the books are my concepts. And we have managed as a team to take first place for our cover art on the first two books.
Well, this one
And
also
we
has
have
a great cover with the border and the filigree border.
Yes, yes. That's based on Hawaiian heirloom jewelry, the carved gold, sometimes rubbed with blackening, I guess you would call it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was one of the first things that I asked Yasmin to design for me. And so that appears consistently on every book that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And I sprinkle it in other places. That's part of what you'll see framing my banner on
Yes.
the websites, etc.
Yes.
And again, I'll have a concept, and she's the one who brings it to magic. Great job with that. And then, as I say, the next big thing will be the Tucson Festival of Books.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe I will be there both days, all day long.
All right.
And that will be at the Sisters in Crime tent.
Okay.
And you can be checking your Tucson newspapers and the Internet to get more information.
And again, listeners can find information on your website, Jeanne Burrows.
Yes, they can. I have news and events pages.
Yes, you do.
That I have finally gotten a little more involved with Facebook, and I now have a professional page as an author.
Great.
And so every once in a while, if I write a story about Tucson, or I have a blog that might be of benefit to someone, I go ahead and post that information, and then there are hyperlinks, and they can jump from one place to another and learn more to help them, because so many people have helped me. Again, I'm so honored by having the interest that you have demonstrated, Tracy.
Oh, yes.
And if we didn't have people like you, we wouldn't be growing as much as authors. And so I want to give back as much as I can.
Well, I appreciate that. That was Jeanne Burrows-Johnson talking about her latest book, Murders of Conveyance, her upcoming books, and so much more. This is Tracy Hales-Vass, right on Four Corners on KSJE 90.9 FM in Farmington, New Mexico.